time so advanced life can happen within that narrow time window in which cosmology would allow advanced life to exist. Wow. And it's kind of like God racing the clock. I mean, we think of 14 billion years as a long time, but really the Creator has to be very aggressive in intervening spectacularly and miraculously at different points throughout that 14 billion years in order to get things ready for humanity. And keep in mind the time window in which human beings can exist in a civilized state is only a few tens of thousands of years wide. And so if you don't prepare things quickly enough, you miss the window of time in which human beings can exist. And so it's critical that everything be timed just right. So that's why I call it a miraculous history for the Earth, where we see more powerful arguments for fine-tuning.
Wow. Hugh, you just gave us a lot of information, very well articulated.
The book gives more.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let me see if I got this straight. You're talking about two transformation events in Earth's history, one resulting in the formation of the moon and also ridding the Earth of excess water. We had too much water.
Right, okay. And excess atmosphere, too.
And then the second event, allowing, I guess, asteroids to hit the Earth because of the positions of Jupiter and Saturn at that time.
Right.
That allowed for the bombardment, which further paved the way for advanced life in the ways.
Yeah, it altered the chemistry of the interior core of the Earth, which was critical for setting up the long-lasting stable magnetic field, which you need to protect advanced life from the radiation that comes in from the sun and cosmic rays.
And then also plate tectonics, which we would see as forming mountains and continents and that kind of thing.
And again, you want to form them rapidly enough so that you got big continents fast enough that you don't miss that time window in which human beings can exist in cosmic history.
So I can see how you would employ the term a creator aggressively preparing. Some might say, wow, that's a long time, but there's a lot involved.
There's a lot involved,
There's a lot of fine-tuning there.
Right.
Okay. Well, how does your model, the biblical model for life's origin, then differ from naturalistic models? Because wouldn't they acknowledge these events in Earth's history as well?
They do, but those very events mandate that you got a very brief time window for the origin of life. And just kind of lay out the scenario, I took a class once from Carl Sagan, which he kind of laid out the atheistic origin of life model, where he says, you know, we have this vast primordial soup on the Earth, rich in prebiotics, and it percolates for nearly 1 billion years. And because of the vastness and the concentration of the prebiotics in this soup and the length of time, it's simply inevitable that these prebiotic molecules will self-assemble into the proteins, DNA, and RNA that would lead to the first life form from which we've all naturally evolved. So that, in a nutshell, is the origin of life model from a naturalistic perspective. They also posit that the first life would be orders of magnitude simpler than the simplest life we see on the planet today. Contrast is what the Bible says about the origin of life. Number one, the Bible tells us that life starts early. We got the Spirit of God brooding over the surface of the waters even before the 6 creation days. So in our model, the origin of life takes place at the beginning of creation day 1. So it's early in the history of the earth. And life is created supernaturally, which means we'd expect it to instantaneously show up in diverse and complex and abundant forms. And so now we can go to the evidence and say which model is best supported by what we see. And we can go back to that late heavy bombardment. We know the date of that bombardment. It peaked at 3.85 billion years ago. We know it was intense enough to liquefy and turn into liquid lava the entire surface of the Earth at least 200 kilometers deep. And we're talking temperatures in excess of 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So I would guarantee that anything that could be possibly resembling the building blocks of life would have been destroyed.
Not exactly a hot tub, though.
Well, you know, geophysicists refer to this as the Hadean era because the Earth was hellishly hot. But at the late heavy bombardment, it's so hot that, you know, there's no way you're going to get any prebiotics surviving such an event. On the other hand, the chemical record tells us we see several chemical signatures for life as early as 3.8 billion years. And keep in mind, it takes about 50 million years for the Earth to recover from the late heavy bombardment. And this is consistent, too. The oldest rocks we see on the face of the Earth come in at about 3.8 billion years ago. What that tells us is that life originated on planet Earth in a geologic instant. Within a few million years or less.
That's an instant geologically.
Well, we cannot measure it any more precisely than that, but the moment that the Earth has the conditions that would even allow for the possibility of the existence of life, we see life on planet Earth, and the chemical signatures tell us that the life was abundant, and it was diverse, and also complex. You say, what do you mean by complexity? We know that there were photosynthetic life forms, which means you're looking at bacteria that have several thousand gene products in them. In other words, we're not seeing the first life on planet Earth being orders of magnitude simpler than the simplest life on the planet today. We're seeing it equally complex, and it's actually more complex than the simplest life we see on the planet today because of the signature of photosynthetic life, which literally requires several thousand genes in order to function.
Wow. So when life appeared, it appeared abruptly with not enough time from a naturalistic perspective to come upon the scene then?
That's correct.
And no primordial soup either?
Well, that's the second point.
Okay.
Carl Sagan's claim that there was this vast primordial soup that percolated for billions of years is contradicted by the evidence. What we see are the chemical signatures for the carbonaceous molecules being biological rather than non-biological. The interesting thing is that the prebiotics will have a higher ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 than carbonaceous molecules that are part of living systems. Life likes carbon-12 relative to carbon-13. And so what we see in the carbonaceous material, the most ancient carbonaceous material on planet Earth, is it has the signature of being postbiotic, not prebiotic. Bottom line, planet Earth never had a prebiotic soup. Then the physicist jumps in and says, we know why it never had a prebiotic soup. It's what's called the ultraviolet oxygen paradox. If you got oxygen in Earth's environment, that oxygen is toxic to prebiotic chemistry. It will not allow prebiotics to form. On the other hand, if you take the oxygen away, then ultraviolet radiation streams in from the sun, and ultraviolet radiation likewise is toxic to prebiotic chemistry. So from a naturalistic perspective, you've got a lose-lose proposition. If you got oxygen, it can't happen. If you don't have oxygen, it can't happen.
Okay. Given these obstacles from a naturalistic perspective, could life have originated elsewhere in the solar system, perhaps, and migrated this way?
Joe, you're right on target. Scientists discovering that there's no time for the origin of life on planet Earth, and there's no prebiotic soup, and holding to a naturalistic perspective basically said, well, if it's impossible on planet Earth, it must have happened in outer space and somehow got transported to the Earth. And it was that discovery of no time and no soup for the origin of life on planet Earth that launched the discipline of astrobiology. If it can't happen on Earth, they said it must have happened in outer space. So what I review in the book, and there's a lot more detail in our book, Origins of Life, is why astrobiology still ranks as a data-free discipline.
Now, that sounds tongue-in-cheek, but I think you have more to say about that.
Well, we do. What we do is to kind of follow the path of astrobiology research, where they first said, well, if life came from outer space, it would be most reasonable that it came from a nearby location. And so Mars was tapped as the spot where the origin of life took